As we hurtle headlong into the digital age, pause to ponder just how far we've come. The 80s generation had no .com, no digital. The future they imagined has been transformed by a technology revolution. My, how we've changed. Welcome to a short history of the modern world, charting the good and bad of a quarter century of innovation. This is Stop Rewind. One day, it'll be a relic, washed up and washed out. But until that time, it will define our epoch. It's a machine which has changed our society forever, right from its humble, oversized beginnings.
Anyone who urgently wishes to know whether 2 to the power of 127 minus 1 is a prime number or not can be given the answer by an electronic brain in 25 minutes instead of by a human brain in 6 months.
Its capacity to store ever-increasing amounts of data and transmit information instantly at the touch of a button has altered the way we communicate, brought the world into our lounge rooms like never before, and effectively shrunk the planet. It's made mavericks into millionaires.
This is what it's all about. Lots of advances, lots of things that we can draw on.
And millionaires into billionaires.
We're talking about billions of dollars every year, just in terms of profits.
It's promised so much.
This is a prototype of what the first electronic books will look like.
The sheer impact on our everyday lives, it's up there with fire, the printing press, the internal combustion engine, and TV shows which condense vast slabs of history into half an hour. We're talking about the personal computer. Born in the 80s, refined in the 90s, and revered in the noughties. On this episode, we'll look at just some of the highlights, but we'll also look at some of the lowlights. Remember the handwriter?
I believe within 10 years, majority of the computers produced in the world will be using handwriter concept to operate a computer.
Perhaps not. If you were one of the first generation of computer geeks, 1981 was a great year. IBM launched the first personal computer, and a small American company called Microsoft started selling MS-DOS. 27 years later, in 2008, there were about 1 billion personal computers in the world, and it's estimated it will take just 7 years for that figure to double. Every day, those billion-plus computers send more than 200 billion emails flying through cyberspace. So imagine, if you will, the dim, distant days of 1985 BE. That's before email, when lab computers, as they were known, were the new black.
They're much lighter than a portable typewriter. There's no paper to worry about. It's incredibly easy to transmit back to the home office.
Easy if you had this clunky chunk of 80s tech. You'd know it better as an early form of the modem, a mainline hookup that made you part of the net. But back then, there was no click and connect. You had to plug in, dial up, call up the file, and push the button. Every single time you wanted to send a message, line by line by line. On the other side of the world, in the middle of the night, it arrived at a lonely little office computer, where it sat until someone arrived the next morning to pick it up. Prehistoric by today's standards, but a revelation back then. Sending a letter in minutes instead of the days or weeks an international courier would have taken by air or sea. Circa 1987, and over in Paris, their online R&D was taking its natural course, letting the birds meet the bees in some very early online chat rooms. Mademoiselle Renee enters her pseudonym Cleo, and within seconds, Icarus is making online eyes at her.
What did he say?
He said that he was a man of 37 and free.
Aren't they all?
I said, I am also free, but not tonight.
And before this rudimentary email / chat room / online dating was off the ground, the great-grandfather of Skype was doing the rounds. The computer phone.
Using computer phone, you can start a task, say writing a memo, answer the phone, look up data.
It had all the stuff we use our computers for, but this was over 20 years ago. And so was this awesome bit of high-concept experimentation.
Excuse me. Jill Gilbert is calling back.
Great. Put her through.
Hi, Mike. What's up?
Apple called it the Knowledge Navigator. And this 1988 film by George Lucas was a pretty good prediction of how things have turned out. Live streaming, multimedia, interactive. It's pretty much an iPad.
The relationship, fundamental relationship between a human being and a computing machine changes from
A simple tool to more of an assistant.
In 1995, Bill Gates took that fundamental change and turned the computer into a billion-dollar entertainment business.
I think you'll see a reduction in video game and TV watching where these interactive titles will fill into that.
It might look sci-fi, kooky, or kitsch to you now, but it was big picture prototypes like this back in the 80s that led to email, the iPhone in your pocket, and that laptop on your desk. And it was all backed up by some heavy-hitting processing power that just kept getting bigger and better.
32 kilobytes, 64, 128, even more.
Because over the past 30 years, the raw performance of computers has pretty much doubled every 2 years, which is why your mobile phone probably has as much computing power as a couple of hundred of these early laptops. Data storage, the ability of your computer to store all those movies, photos, and files you need, has also increased massively, while the space needed to do so has shrunk. So today, you can store as much data on one of these as you could store on around 28 of these back in 1999, or as much as 4,000 or so of these back in 1989. And it's just as well we're getting more power in smaller packages. Otherwise, we'd probably be needing computers the size of a house just to do internet banking or download some files. Speaking of computers the size of a house, now this is either the world's smallest TV presenter,
Press this function key here,
or an exhibit from the Computer Museum in Boston, Massachusetts from way back in 1991.
and then we go to the mouse or trackball. Let's not use the small one, we'll use the real one.
It came complete with a 2-meter square macro chip, transistors 3,000 times bigger than normal, and a CPU blown up 75 times, so you could watch 20 million instructions a second at work. But back to the real question right now of how chips got smaller, faster, and cheaper. Back in the mid-80s, the guys on the future tech frontline were the US Defense Department, making a chip called the VHSIC, the Very High Speed Integrated Circuit. It was designed to help win wars because this was an era when the big hits of computing were coming from the guys with the guns. A large slab of the Cold War arms race was all about outcomputing the commies. A year later, IBM came up with the first million-bit memory chip. 6 of them could hold a 250-page novel, and the acronyms were flying.
Densely packed circuits that go under the name of VLSI, or Very Large Scale Integration.
But VLSI had nothing on this baby, the Cray 2. 10 times more powerful than any other computer back in 1987. But believe it or not, all that most powerful talk amounted to only 2 GB of memory. That's about 1/10 as much storage as a memory stick from 2010 has. Still, the Cray 2 had enough grunt to design NASA planes and store a library's worth of information. All this high-end chip technology was starting to trickle down into everyday homes. The Boffins had put a chip into just about everything, from kitchen appliances, shavers, right up to the family car. And all those consumer computer products meant a whole lot of consumer cash.
The stakes in this race are phenomenal. We're talking about billions of dollars every year, just in terms of profits.
As the profits got bigger, the chips kept getting smaller and more powerful. A British company called Inmos was making some big claims. The biggest leap forward since the invention of the silicon chip, to be exact. It was the transputer, a transistor cum computer. The first general-purpose microprocessor designed specifically to be used in parallel computing systems.
So that all 1,000 transputers would be working on it simultaneously. We could actually go 1,000 times as fast.
Some boffins even thought the transputer's potential could eventually help us emulate the greatest computer of all, the human brain.
If we, in computing, can understand how artificial neural networks work, it might give us some more of an understanding in how the brain works.
Transputers never lived up to their next big thing reputation, but parallel processing, a computer system similar in concept, is something we take for granted these days. And this technology was well underway by the time the 90s came round. Nice work, and nice mullet. But all this one-upmanship just goes to prove the old adage. By the time you've bought it, it's already out of date. Or, to put it another way,
there will always be something much better coming out next month.
We know computers have fundamentally changed our lives. We know that some people know a lot more about them than we do.
Hi, this is Steve Jobs. I want to welcome you to the next world.
And they love what they do.
I'd do my job if I wasn't paid at all.
Seriously?
Seriously.
But it doesn't mean they always get it right.
Personal computer as we know it is obsolete technology.
In fact, I think the personal computer will turn out to be the horseless carriage of the information revolution.
Hindsight means we don't have to agree with that one. But it doesn't matter how clever the idea is, or how much money is poured into it, some things just never make it. Take this digital doohickey from 1992.
When you need to point and click, you don't reach for the mouse. The user simply double-clicks the shift button and attaches a transmitter.
It was a prototype mouse on a ring, which controlled the cursor while you typed. Great for typing in cramped conditions.
So something new in the pipeline for those insisting on a rodent-free environment.
Sadly, it seems we gave the finger mouse the finger. Here's another one that never made the Computer Hall of Fame.
A French company, Anatex, has come up with this, the personal writer, a way of using good old pen and paper to talk to your computer.
Ingenious. Take a piece of paper, put it on a touch-sensitive palette, and grab an electronic pen that really writes. It's the end of the keyboard as we know it. Or not. 2 years later, it was the same idea, different name. This one was called the handwriter. And once more, it was claimed to be the next big thing.
Within 10 years, majority of the computers produced in the world will be using handwriter concept to operate a computer.
It seemed the big guys really had it in for the keyboard. Pen-driven systems did become a sideline in computing, but they didn't replace the keyboard. I guess their argument was just a tad too weird.
Basically, pointing with a mouse is very crude. It's sort of like pointing with a potato in your hand.
Who would have thought the spud would be mightier than the pen? And what about books? Surely they were destined for the dustbin of history. Well, at least that's what they thought back in 1987.
The electronic book is here. This is a prototype of what the first electronic books will look like.
And it's kind of come true. We can fit a whole library on gizmos like the Kindle and iPad. Another similar development that was decades ahead of its time in concept was the Apple Newton from the late 80s.
This is the most important thing that I've ever been involved with in my entire life.
It was the original PDA, a pocket computer with handwriting recognition, simple graphics, and fax capability. Although this must-have device of the 90s didn't see out the decade, Newton is now affectionately regarded as the grandfather of the iPhone. But these weren't the only attempts at making computers portable. Aussie geeks went underwater with their concept. A computer that told them all the info they needed, how much air they've got left, and how deep they went, but not how to avoid becoming a shark sandwich. Now that would have sold.
That was great.
Back on land, and sport was catching the computer bug, with pros pounding the pavement with computerized running shoes that could tell you how far and how fast you'd run. Another chip off the old computer that added even more sweat to the athlete's life was biomechanics. This fusion between sport and science let coaches calculate how to win more gold medals and more goals. The ability of computers to boot up a player's performance improved previously mundane details, like sports footwear.
I think this is just the start of a new generation, new era in football, looking at a football boot as a performance tool.
If the pros liked it, the consumers quickly bought into the reflected glory, which is why most sports shoes today still boast some type of athlete-endorsed, computer-designed enhancement. Even the high tempo of 80s self-absorption, the aerobics studio, a place where one would think little was required apart from a fetish for spandex, saw some electronic enthusiasm when computers took on the role of personal trainers. Another area where the silicon chip scored well was with computerized umpires, like the tennis line judge, able to make a call on a bounce that takes just 1/8,000th of a second. They came into action in the late 80s. Around the same time, John McEnroe left the game. A strange coincidence, perhaps. A somewhat more sedate use of processing power was this golf caddy. You just wear a transmitter that lets the buggy know where you are, then it follows along. And wondering why no one took this idea to the next level with a robotic drinks trolley still keeps me up at night. In the ever-increasing adaptation of electronics to our enjoyment, one American took his computer on a geeked-out road trip. Roll on in, the Winnie Biko.
I live in data space now, and it doesn't matter where my body is.
A little nerdy, but another good prediction on just how mobile we were going to get with our computers. Thankfully, all this tech can fit in your pocket these days in the shape of a BlackBerry or an iPhone. We mentioned computers in cars before, but not all silicon chip speed machines were this sexy. Meet a teched-out, tuned-up Porsche that was one of the first cars to benefit from putting chips in the block, courtesy of the Bosch Motronic engine system, making it more efficient and, more importantly, faster. Computerized energy management systems have become the norm in most cars today. Without them, the cars just won't go. Kind of like this freaky fighter jet that needed a silicon chip to get airborne. This is the Grumman X-29. Okay, it looks like it's flying backwards. However, these wings made it maneuverable at supersonic speed. But it was so unstable that without a computer tweaking the front wings hundreds of times a second to maintain stability, this digital dogfighter would never have left the ground.
It's unflyable without the digital computer on board.
It was kind of unflyable long-term as well, never entering mainstream military use. The safety computers gave planes has made the silicon chip a permanent part of aviation. But unless someone invents the computerized crystal ball, it's hard to know what will hit the spot and what will miss the mark. Computers that are voice-activated have always seemed like a good idea.
Speak to this computer.
But one notion to make them easier to use involved the operator having to learn Chinese.
The Chinese alphabet is made up of sounds rather than individual letters, as in English, and there are only about 400 of these.
There was logic to it. kind of. But the 75% of the world's population who don't speak Chinese were breathing a sigh of relief when some slicker packages came out.
Good morning, computer, comma. Let's see how smart you really are. Full stop, new paragraph.
Not only did it recognize the English language, it had software that could also differentiate between similar sounding words. You can see that it's given 2 different spellings for the word practice, which is very clever. Voice-activated computers are now a common sideline in computing, but they're yet to go mainstream. I guess yapping can be as hard as tapping. But here's a computer innovation worth thinking about. A computer that works by thinking about it. Yep, it reads the activity going on in your brain to operate.
To go down, I would think about really concentrating on holding a pen tightly and writing my name, having difficulty writing my name. For going up, I think of smiling or of chewing gum or something like that.
Like so many research projects, it started out as a potential aid for fighter pilots. Fast forward to 2005, and New England Sinai Hospital realised it's a better aid for disabled people. Known as BrainGate, it used a tiny microchip surgically implanted in the part of the brain that controls movement. As of 2010, they were still experimenting with getting BrainGate patients to operate artificial limbs.
Open. I just like to tell those people in wheelchairs to hold on, because there's better. Things are gonna get better, you know. That's the best circle I can do. Now I'm going to exit.
Previously, we saw how some early attempts at the internet were used for some haphazard attempts at dating. In Australia, they were using a prototype version of the net for something else.
One day you'll be able to do all your banking from home. One day this week, perhaps. In other words, it's here now.
In 1985, Australia became the first country to introduce banking from home on a national basis.
And all you need is a little keyboard like this, a telephone, and your TV set.
The Viatel system could even send messages. But by 1995, the real internet had arrived, known back then as the information superhighway. It's hard to imagine a time when it wasn't an everyday part of everyone's life.
It's a bit like using a computer. You can use it in a fairly simple fashion, and the easiest ways to use the internet are electronic mail and the World Wide Web.
Ah, the World Wide Web. It ripped up the rulebook on everything, from how we do business to going on a date. It's also created a world that moves faster than we can think, faster than we can comprehend, creating a future shock, the impact of which is still uncertain. Where the benefit of using the web to stay in contact with loved ones is offset by the new threats of cyberstalking and online crime. So it looks like we'll all have to wait another 25 years to see just how far this computer revolution takes us.